This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1364. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We do that through interviewing people, talking about just all the different corners of the counseling world. As many of you know, I've been working on Great Lakes Online Counseling, where I've been spending only 2 hours a week working on hiring, working on getting the practice going, and doing that publicly. So if you've missed any of those episodes, go back and follow that journey from start to where we're at now, because it's definitely not finished. So we do all sorts of things like that, and a lot of that comes out of just the fact that in graduate school and in our trainings, we oftentimes didn't get the things that really matter when it comes to private practice. And of course, we want clinicians to leave grad school having good clinical work, being thoughtful in that space. But there's a big gap there that we all recognize. And when I think back to my even my practicum and internships, I still remember my practicum supervisor, Dr. Brady Harnischfager, and he was such a good connection into the counseling world by getting to know him throughout that semester, and then doing my internship, where literally I was working with this guy who he was a psychologist, he was a priest, it was at Catholic Family Services, so he was in the schools as a psychologist, he was doing mass on the weekends as a priest, and then he was freelancing in the evenings as a psychologist with Catholic Family Services. I mean, the guy was so busy, but I still remember for my internship, it's like if I wasn't seated in his office when the counseling session started, and he started early, he just shut the door. He wasn't like, "Hey Joe, like come on in." My internship experience was good, but also it was like really rigid, and I don't think in a lot of ways it prepared me. I remember my second client was dealing with schizophrenia, and I didn't know a whole lot about that, so I actively listened. I reflected back. I said maybe we should set some treatment goals. And so there's lots of things in our internships and how we're trained that can be rough. We can learn a lot from those tough situations. We can say, I like this, I don't like this. And that's where I am so excited to have Alexandria Alex Fields with us today. Alex is a licensed independent social worker in Ohio with over 16 years of experience in mental health. In 2021, she founded Inclusive Counseling, a group practice committed to aligning with her core values, reducing barriers to treatment, fostering a supportive work culture, and prioritizing the well being of therapists while ensuring that marginalized clients felt seen and safe within the practice. Under her leadership, inclusive counseling has grown to include 26 clinicians, earning a stellar reputation in the community. Her journey exemplifies how values driven leadership can transform mental health services and create a supportive, thriving professional community as well. Alex is one of our keynote speakers at the Group Practice Conference that's happening in just a month. So if you have not got your tickets, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/conference to see Alex on stage. Alex, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk with you. I mean, honestly, to go from starting practice in 2021 to now
Mhm.
having 26 clinicians, holy crap.
Yeah, yeah, it grew and it grew fast.
How did it grow that fast?
Um, I think you said it very well with that intro. We practice what we preach, and call it the social worker in me. But I didn't build a practice while only fixated on business and profit margins. I built a practice that I wanted to be proud of, built on ethics and ensuring that both clients and clinicians were treated with dignity and respect. And that has paved its own path, really.
Hmm. Now, I know that a lot of folks, when they're thinking about starting a practice, kind of the typical way is that they start solo, then
Mhm.
they hire a full licensed person, then usually a second fully licensed person. They tend not to have interns because it's not worth it financially. They tend not to have
Mhm.
limited license or pre-licensed because oftentimes they can't bill for that, or if they can, the amount they get from insurance companies is so small it's hard to even like make ends meet. How did you think through all of that when you were building out inclusive counseling?
Yeah, so I did start off with the practice. I started off on my own, but um, realized that I did miss teaching and I did want to build into the future generation, and that would make a more sustainable life for myself. So I, got some office space and really had an if you build it, they will come mentality. So I fully furnished 4 offices and started interviewing people as if we had a whole staff of people already, which was an interesting way to go. But it worked really well because right away I was able to hire 3 or 4 people. We had a very kind of team approach there in the beginning. All the people were dependently licensed, so I love that, getting them new and fresh and green and being able to build into them. Um, and having interns has always been a part of I feel like for maybe the past 15 or 20 years, I've had interns. So I have good relationships with the colleges in our area. So they just, they kept reaching out, and it feels like the right thing to me to have interns and to make sure that we have a space where, again, everyone feels welcome both on the client side but also on the clinician side, that it's not only independently licensed folks and it's not only a type of clinician that looks a certain way.
Mm. Now, do those interns often join your practice after they've done their internship?
They do, and that is, on the business side of things, that's a really great asset because they're already trained. They already have a small caseload, right? But they're not
Mhm.
starting green. They already know your software, your systems, and the culture of the workplace. So you save so much time in the fact that you can train them up over really the first couple months of their internship. Whereas with a new hire clinician, you're trying to get that done in a week or two.
Right, right. And so, do you think that because you take insurance, that's easier to make that transition versus, say, if someone was a private pay practice?
I can't speak to private pay practices because I've not ever run one. But definitely the fact that we take insurance, we don't have a shortage of clients for sure. And our clients are fairly open to the intern idea. There are definitely, I think, anytime, anywhere, there's going to be clients that say, no, I only want this particular modality or this particular license. But by and large, we're able to get, I'd say by the height of their internship, they have 10 active clients usually.
Mm, okay. And so, as you think through just like what goes into taking interns, if people are thinking, okay, I think that sounds like something I might want to consider. What should they be considering? What should they be thinking through? Like, yeah, like take us through just like that thought
Yeah.
process for folks.
Yeah, I'll go back to what you said about your own internship. So I started there, right? I started with what did I like and not like about my internship. And I can honestly say I spent a lot of hours staring at a wall, where I didn't know what I was supposed to do. The people I was supposed to be shadowing were MIA doing their own thing. I didn't have a list of tasks to do. So that's kind of where I started was I created a list of tasks of if you have downtime, here are the things I want you to be working on. And I have those interns then also report those things to me each week. Hey, what did you work on in your time? You were supposed to do 20 hours. Show me 20 hours worth of work. If they read a book, I expect them to be able to discuss it. If they said they looked over the resource log, again, I expect there to be updates or them to be able to discuss it. So we set that bar right away. And the interns have been appreciative. That by and large, the feedback that we get is, I learned a lot, which is overwhelming during your internship, but at the end, they're typically very grateful. So, yeah, I think making sure you have a structure that you want them to follow would probably be my place to say to start.
Yeah, what are some examples of those special projects people can work on outside of the direct clinical hours?
Yeah, my first task that I have them all do is they have to read the laws and rules of our board, which I know is mind-numbingly boring. But at the same time, those are you've already said you read them if you got a license, right? And most people didn't actually read them. So I tell them they need to read them and make notes because I want to talk about them. I want them to find things that actually apply to private practice. I want them to find areas where they're like, "Ooh, I never thought about that. What would I do in that situation?"
Mm.
And so that's the first couple of weeks, or not weeks, but the first couple of one-on-ones that we have is talking about that. um, as time goes on, it includes things like marketing themselves and reaching out to discharge social workers at organizations and making sure they're building their own network within the community.
Mm. Yeah, and I imagine that, if they've built that network, those connections, they're, better prepared than when
Yeah.
they do fully graduate and they're ready to jump into full-time private practice or part-time,
Yeah.
that it's a lot easier for you.
Well, it's a lot easier for them too. Whether or not they join the practice, think about what most private practitioners complain about. Am I getting enough clients? Okay, well, then that starts day one of your internship, right? That doesn't start on day one of you opening your own private practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Now talk about that transition when someone is an intern and they're transitioning then after grad school into your practice. Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, it's very seamless. That's my favorite type of person to hire. So they already, like I said, they already know all of the structure. We treat our interns very much the same way we treat our employees. Our interns are employees, they get paid. We do feel that compensating people for their time is the right thing to do. So they immediately get a raise, which they love, of course, because they got their license now. Um, they have the same expectations in their internship versus their beginning of their career with attending supervision and making sure that they are doing their documentation in the correct ways, making sure that they're communicating clearly. All of those things have already been happening. So for them, there's a not much of a learning curve at all.
Mm. Now, take me back to, you said you pay the interns. So are you charging clients for their time, or like how are you figuring out the
Yeah.
payment side of it?
Yeah, some interns, or I'm sorry, some insurances do allow for interns to bill under their supervisor as long as they have their um, intern license, their provisional license. In Ohio, it's the counselor trainee, the social work trainee, or the MFT trainees, very simply named. So as long as they have that license, which we do require of all interns. Again, we take Medicaid, they can bill the Medicaid plans, and there's a few private insurances that allow it. And then, yes, we do have a lower private pay rate.
Mm.
And if you look at the business structure as a whole, that's also a very intentional choice. We don't, we're not a nonprofit. We don't have a sliding fee scale. We don't collect income data on our clients, but we can offer intern rates, which are much lower. Um, and then we can pay our interns more than minimum wage to do their job. We've also found that a lot of our interns are so stressed out by trying to be in school full time. They're trying to work full time. They have relationships in their own life. And now we're throwing in an internship that's 20 hours a week. So, one of the things we can say to them is, well, what if you could drop down to part time at your job? Because we're going to pay you more, most of the time, more than what your job is paying you.
Mm.
And that's been really helpful for their quality of life.
Yeah, and when people move into being part-time or full-time with your practice, one thing that we often talk about is just whether you pay a percentage, whether you're paying a fixed rate, whether that fixed rate is the same for everyone across the board, how you think through salaries for part-time and full-time. When it comes to compensation, how do you think through that? Whatever you're willing to share. I know there's things that maybe you wouldn't want to share publicly, but
Yeah.
like, how do you think through salaries, fixed rate percentages, all of that? Especially, and I ask especially because traditionally Medicaid and Medicare don't pay very well, and so that really like changes sometimes some of those dynamics too. And so, just would love to hear how you're thinking through that.
Yeah, so in our region, Medicaid pays better than multiple of the commercial insurances.
Oh wow.
So I think that there's a bit of a myth in the field that Medicaid doesn't pay well. They also pay faster and easier. They are so easy to work with. So I always challenge people to fight back against that myth. Now, I do know there are
Mm.
some regions where Medicaid still pays lower. Um, but yeah, we find that it's a pleasant platform to actually work with. So we have a flat. So we do pay a flat rate per billable hour, and that changes whether it's a full session or a 45-minute session or a half-hour session. We have set a 1 hour billable rate um, number, and then if they're doing, let's say, a 90834, a 45-minute session, they're going to get 75% of that rate. Whereas if they're doing a 90832 half hour, they're going to get half of that rate. And then we set that on a tier system. So interns have a tier, dependently licensed folks have a tier, independently licensed folks, and then people who are actively supervising. And then within that, there's some wiggle room depending on if they bring a specialty to the table that's in high demand.
Mm. And Do you do anything around salaries, or is it all just fee per session?
Yeah, it's per session is what we found. And what we've done, I feel in some ways privileged to have interviewed so many people. In no way, I make this very clear, in no way do I ever ask people what they made at their past jobs, but man, people are they're very quick to tell me, and I'm like, I didn't ask that question. But as such, we've kind of heard what the industry averages are.
Mhm.
And so we just wanted to beat that. That's where we set our rate is, hey, people are telling us they're making this much, then we're going to pay more than that if we can. And by, I'd say most of the time we can.
And how did you run the math on what that fixed rate would be? Like, is it like 40% of what the average is of all the insurances? Is it like just
Yeah.
how did you figure that out?
So we looked at what percentage of our practice each insurance is, right? So
Mm.
Anthem, let's say is 50% of our practice, and CareSource is 20% of our practice. And then we plugged in the numbers of what each of those insurances pays us, and we came up with an average. Okay, this is how much our average session is. Because wouldn't we all love to make the average be our top payer? Private pay rate, right? Oh gosh.
Mm.
And that's, I think, what the misconception is with employees. No, you charge that much. And that's, yes, that's what we charge, but no, that's not what we're getting paid. So I'm able to then share that data with the staff as well. So, hey, based on our current um, insurance breakdown, here's how much the average session is paying. And then, yes, we looked at what is our overhead, what's our budget, how much are we paying out for all these different um, expenses that a practice has. Make sure there's wiggle room. We need to make sure there's a cushion and some profit, and then set the pay from there.
Hmm. I love that. I think oftentimes, at least what I see, is people that take more of a like good for the world, like this is the kind of practice we want to have, um, lead with their heart, which is
Mhm.
awesome. We need more of that. We definitely need that in the world.
Yeah.
And they oftentimes get themselves in neck deep where they've
Yes.
overpromised. They say, "Oh, I want to be better than CMH." And then next thing you
Mhm.
know, they're like, "I'm not making any money. I'm going to shut this thing down. I'm burned out."
Yeah.
I'd make more money if I was a clinician in my practice than as the owner. And so
Yeah.
I love that you found that sweet spot of saying, no, we do run the numbers. And we
Mhm.
also say we want to build a business that impacts people, that, has these ethics, has a moral compass. And we also can all make the money that is maybe better than what we could have if we didn't have this practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, by and large, I'm a logic-brained person, which tends to surprise people being in the therapy field. I have the heart of the social worker, but I have to tune into that. My default is like, show me the numbers, show me the data. Like, I need to understand how things work. And so that has worked, I'd say, so far. It's working very well. There is profit. We've never not made payroll. These are the types of things that I hear from other people applying to work for us. I ask every interviewee, what are you looking for that's different? What do you think we have that what your current position doesn't have? And those are the types of things I'm hearing, right? They didn't make payroll. They complained all the time about the rates or this, that, or the other, just kind of those, like you said, in over your head types of situations.
Yeah, yeah. How do you think through hiring? Like, how do you know when to hire? How do you know when it's time to bring someone else on? Are there
Yeah.
numbers you're watching around niches or time of
Mhm.
week or like anything at the front desk to know, like, all right,
Yeah.
Alex, it's time to hire again? Or like, how do you think through hiring?
Yeah. We we love our reputation in the community because we get applicants nonstop. So some of it is
Mm.
like we look at the applicants and we're like, oh my gosh, we don't have anywhere to put them, or do we have somewhere to put them? So that's the number one question. Do we have a space for them? We do. We have 3 offices, and I have this intricate kind of spreadsheet of office space and making sure that we're not over committing. Um, we find that virtual only is not. We don't hire virtual only anymore because they have the hardest time building a caseload. Clients want to come in
Mm.
person. Um, so we look at one, office space. We look at two, how many people are currently accepting new, because we have to keep the culture in mind as well. If I've got 15 clinicians trying to get new clients, it doesn't make sense to bring somebody else on board, right? Because that's
Right.
not fair. Now, what I've told some of my clinicians is if somebody comes on board, you have to trust that I'm making a good decision. Maybe they're telling me they're bringing their whole caseload with them, right? They don't need any new clients. Well, then yes, I could probably bring you on board because you're not going to be fighting your colleagues for clients. So it's weighing those things out, Also, are they bringing a specialty to the table that we don't currently have or we're currently turning clients away for? So example, a child therapist, right? We all know kid therapists get full. They get full fast and they stay full. So if, we've got a whole bunch of people accepting new adults and a child therapist applies, well, yes, maybe we would bring them on board again because they're not competing for the same client.
Yeah, love that. Are there other metrics or data points, since you said that's kind of the hat that you naturally wear, that you think about in the practice that maybe wouldn't be as obvious, but has been really helpful for growing the practice?
I track everything, and I have tracked everything from day one. I've tracked things that I didn't know if I needed to track. Um, Number of intakes, number of cancellations, number of sessions per week, number of this billing code versus that billing code, um, number of hours in office versus virtual. I have an Excel spreadsheet tracking everything I can possibly track. And it's come in handy. There have been times where either a therapist has a question, hey, why is it this way? And I'm like, wait a minute, I have that data.
I have a
Um,
spreadsheet for that.
yes, I do. And sometimes they ask a question and I don't have a spreadsheet for that. I'm like, that is excellent. We need to figure out a way to track that. So I think those are the things that I can track them, and then we can utilize that to make our decisions and defend our decisions. As we know, every employee is going to push back and ask questions, and they want to understand why things are the way that they are. So I try to be really transparent about those things, and as much as possible, explain the logic for why decisions have been made or why they need to be made.
Yeah, yeah. Now, for those that maybe aren't naturally good with spreadsheets, if you were to say, here's the minimum like 5 dashboard things that help you make 80% of the decisions, what would be the things that you'd say every practice you need to be like? You had mentioned intakes, you mentioned like no
Yeah.
shows, that's probably in there.
Mhm.
What else should they be tracking if they aren't an Excel or a spreadsheet
Yeah.
person?
Yeah, I mean, I call that my counts. So my counts each week that's the biggest thing I want to know is the intakes, the cancellations, and the number of sessions billed. Because, like as you mentioned, you'll start to see trends over seasons. You'll start to see trends. So we already know that Thanksgiving, Christmas, we're going to drop down to 50% of what we normally do. So we need to budget for that. We need to plan for that. We already know that summer tends to be lighter. We tend to get less intakes and people want to go off and do their own thing, and that's fine, but that's maybe not the best time to hire. Um, so those come in. I mean, obviously your budget, I think how much money is coming in, how much money is going out. Those are numbers that I think tend to scare social workers and practice owners and therapists, but the reality is we need to look at them or else they're going to sneak up and bite us when we're not ready. So making sure that we're really being honest with ourselves
Mm,
and uh, and making decisions from the data, like you said, and not just from the heart.
mhm. I know when you've built things and you're leading and growing that you've got to keep it new for yourself, or you've got to keep it creative. You got to find new ways to look at it. Otherwise, for most people that are kind of builder startup types, it starts to feel stagnant.
Yeah.
What are you inspired by? What are you moving towards? How are you keeping this fresh? Or maybe there's things outside of the practice that you're exploring that
Mhm.
keep the whole industry of mental health fresh for you.
Yeah, we just kind of did this. So I share with the practice every year what my kind of New Year's resolutions are for the practice. Hey, here's what I'm thinking about. What do you guys think? And so far, from 2021 until now, it's kind of been open a new office, right? Things get boring, open a new office. So we've been looking at, do we open another one? Do we open a fourth location or do we not? And we joke so far that having three locations is like having three kids. That third one tips the scales. It was too many, right? The third one was like, oh, maybe not a great idea. Um, it's been,
You're probably not the third kid in your family.
I'm not. No, my mom was smart and she stopped at two. I have three, so I can say that three is too much.
I'm the
Um,
oldest of three, and so no, I get that. My sister has three, and I just have two. So
oh yeah, two is where it's where you stop.
it's a nice sweet
But so
spot.
we're looking right now at expanding actually in our current location. So we're talking to
Mm.
those buildings and seeing if we can get more space just to, is that an option to grow without, having to manage a fourth location? So that's a piece of it. Um, we recently got our CEU approval, so we're, asking our clinicians, do you want to offer account, CEUs? Do you have topics that you're passionate about that you want to share with your colleagues? And even if they're only offered internal, it's a fun way to connect and share information. So yeah, I think just playing around with, like you said, what is a new idea, a fresh idea? But I specifically asked the staff as well, like, is there something you guys want to see? Is there something you guys would like to have? And seeing if we can grow in that regard as well.
Mm. So awesome. What do you do to not have this be what you think about all the time? I think a lot of owners that I talk to, their phones are dinging at 9 at night.
Yeah.
They're checking Slack. There's always something to do. Like, how, I guess maybe my real question is like, how do you set boundaries around what you'll do and when?
Yeah, I take full liberties with having a flexible schedule. So, um, I sometimes do, last night I was working from 9 to 10 while I was watching a movie. I was like, I can submit claims while I'm sitting here, no big deal.
Mm.
But I also met up with friends for brunch, right? So I I sometimes don't work while my kids are at school. That's when I'm running around. I might be, shopping or spending time outdoors or going and hanging out with friends, with the full intention of knowing that I'm going to put a few hours in later in the evening. We've also found my family loves to travel. We're big camping people. So in the summer, last summer, we were gone half of the summer, but we
Mm.
work from the camper and I can, right? That's an option. So making sure that I'm not just sitting here at this desk all the time has been huge.
Mm.
So sometimes it's working from the library or a coffee shop. Um, but I definitely also have intentional rhythms. And I think that's really important for any, I would say, working parent or working human is, you know, do you regularly meet up with friends? Do you have a hobby? Are you putting hours in with that hobby? Do you have other interests in making sure that you're not just shoulding, like, oh, I should do that or I should make time, but no, but actually doing it. And that's a challenge. It is a big challenge because,
Mm.
like you said, there is always an email to answer. I
Mhm.
have had those days where I sit down and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to answer a few. And 8 hours later, I'm still sitting here. I haven't eaten. I haven't
Mm.
gotten up. And that's, to me, I mean, that's a huge red flag that I need to pivot.
Yeah, I have to set timers because I
Mhm.
really, when I get working, I get into great flow states and
Mhm.
I'm just
Oh,
kicking it out. But then it's
yep.
like, no, I need to like decide before I start working how long I want to work and when I'm going to go make dinner or when I'm going to go do something else. To me, I
Yes.
think I have a personality that if I don't kind of put rocks in my schedule to say this is a non-negotiable. So,
Yes.
I wrote a book about the 4-day work week. So taking on a consulting client on a Friday, that's a non-negotiable.
Yep.
If someone has an emergency within practice of the practice and we have to have a call on a Friday, I'm not going to get mad about it, but having improv every Tuesday night and
Mhm.
having, these habits, in the winter we're out, skiing every Sunday. We bought the Sunday pass, so it forces us to meet my cheapskate
Yep.
side to be like, we've already paid for it. Like,
Yes.
so
Yes.
for me, I do think having those rocks in the schedule and seeing them as important and strong as any client because it's like I have put that in my calendar, which means that nothing else has been able to get scheduled during that time. So I better show up for myself or I'm just kind of like wasting that time.
Yeah, my husband and I have both bought the movie pass, the unlimited movie pass, and I'm not even a huge movie person at all. But it's time where I'm like, and I'm with you. I think all therapists have had the struggling artist phase where we were broke. So there's a piece that's like, I have to go to 2 movies a month. This has to pay for itself. So I'll go see, some random movie, and half the time I take a nap. I'm like, give me my blanket, I'll go take a nap. But it's time that is intentional and it's carved out. So whatever it is, like, you got to find it.
No, I think finding what also is like your personality type around it, that it's
Mhm.
like I really need to have it in the schedule and be like I am not going to do something else. I need to do this thing that's important. So that's awesome. Alex, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would say don't build your practice on the capitalistic ideology of money. Build your practice on your relationship with people, and the money will come. Everything else will fall into place.
I love that. That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. If people want to connect with you, follow your practice, follow your work, where do we want to send them?
Yeah, easy is our website. It's inclusivecounseling.net, spelled just like it sounds.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show and can't wait to meet in person in May.
Yeah, sounds good.
It's interesting, as we do, anti-capitalism work, as we think through just the tenets of it. My partner Claire, she's in University of Michigan's social work program right now. She's been long in that work, in conservancy work, and just evaluating what we've inherited. Just to even like look at the sense of urgency as a capitalistic value. And for me, that's been where I've just said, I'm gonna just slow down and evaluate, like, is this thing that feels urgent for me, whether it's in my business, my life, like whatever, is that something that really is urgent? And I've recognized that my sense of urgency, my sense of being on time, my sense of like wasting other people's time, is really ingrained in me in a way that it causes a lot of unnecessary anxiety and stress. So I love that Alex said, in a different, way that like we don't have to build these businesses just to make money. We don't have to buy into that. We can have it all. I mean, look at what she's built here. She has this amazing business that employs a ton of people, serves a ton of people, and matches the value set that she wants to put into the world. It's such a great example of just what we say all the time. We want you to have a thriving private practice you absolutely love, that you thrive, you do well, you grow, and it matches your values. It matches what you want to put out into the world. We couldn't do this work without our sponsors. Gusto's our sponsor today. It's who we use here at Practice of the Practice for all of our payroll needs. It's specifically built for small businesses. It's all in one, remote friendly, and incredibly easy for us to use. They have certified HR experts. Honestly, it just makes our life so much easier. So you can try Gusto today for your payroll needs and a ton more over at gusto.com/Joe. That's GUSTO.com/Joe. Also, you don't have to pay anything until you run your first payroll, and they're giving our listeners 3 months for free. So again, that's gusto.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.